Good morning, dear children. Do you have a favorite teacher? Do you always have a wish to know more about your favorite teacher? Yes, we all as kids have a fascination to our favorite teachers. We want to know more about them. Today, we will learn a similar poem in which the poet wishes to know more about his teacher and has a lot of questions about her, or him maybe. The title of the poem for today is Where Do All the Teachers Go? By Peter Dixon. Peter Dixon is a poet, performer, educationist, and artist. He grew up in London as a mainly naughty boy who failed at spelling, understanding of word, form, and grammar. He tended to write secretly at home, drawing and writing of things largely ignored by schools. And possibly it was because of such experiences that led him to write this poem maybe. He became a school teacher and eventually a senior lecturer in education. Dixon is also a children's writer, having published his first book in 1978. Let us all now read the poem together.
Where do all the teachers go? By Peter Dixon. Where do all the teachers go when it's 4 o'clock? Do they live in houses? And do they wash their socks? Do they wear pajamas? And do they watch TV? And do they pick their noses? The same as you and me? Do they live with other people? Have they mums and dads? And were they ever children? And were they ever bad? Did they ever never spell right? Did they ever make mistakes? Were they punished in the corner if they pinched the chocolate flakes? Did they ever lose their hymn books? Did they ever leave their greens? Did they scribble on the desktops? Did they wear old dirty jeans? I'll follow one back home today. I'll find out what they do. Then I'll put it in a poem that they can read to you.
In the first stanza, he says, Where do all the teachers go when it's 4 o'clock? Do they live in houses and do they wash their socks? In this stanza, the child wonders what the teachers do after it is 4 o'clock once they go home. He also wants to know whether they live in houses and whether they wash their own socks. Through this, it just means that the child is curious to know whether the teacher does all the other routine jobs just as all of us do. The second stanza, he asks, do they wear pajamas? And do they watch TV? And do they pick their noses the same as you and me? In this stanza, the child wants to know if the teachers also wear pajamas. What are pajamas? They are a loose pair of trousers tied by a down string around the waist. These are mostly used at night since they are considered a little more comfortable. He also wants to know whether the teachers watch TV just like you and me. He has a very important question. He wants to know whether the teachers pick their noses. What do you mean by pick? Pick means you remove small amounts of unwanted substances from your nose. You will surely know what this means, right? Further, the child asks, do they live with other people? Have they mums and dads? And were they ever children? And were they ever bad? So the child wants to know whether the teacher lives with other people in the house, whether they have their families, whether they have mums and dads, whether they have siblings or children of their own. Did they ever never spell right? Did they ever make mistakes? Were they punished in the corner if they pinched the chocolate flakes? In this, the child is curious whether the teachers ever spelled their spellings right, whether they ever made mistakes. Were they made to stand in a corner and punished there for pinching the chocolate flakes? Most of us may have been punished at some point or the other, right? So the child wants to know whether the teacher too was punished. Did they ever lose their hymn books? Did they ever leave their greens? Did they scribble on the desktops? Did they wear old dirty jeans? The child wants to know whether the teachers have ever lost their hymn books or any of the books in particular. Because most of the times we too lose our books, right? And we get punished because of such things too. So the child wants to know the same thing about the teacher. The most important thing, what we all as children do not like to eat, vegetables. So the child wants to know whether the teacher too removed vegetables from their plates and kept it at the side. Did they leave their greens aside without eating? The child also wants to know whether the teachers too had this very important or rather very funny type of a habit of scribbling on the desktops. What do you mean by scribbling? It just means like an aimless drawing. Sometimes we scribble our names, we scribble the initials of our names, or we scribble something else on the desktops. So the child wants to know just whether the teachers too did this thing. And the most important, sometimes we are just so bored to wash our clothes or to even put them to wash. And so we just pick up whatever we have, we dress it up and we just move out. So the child wants to know whether the teacher too would wear old dirty torn jeans at times. Interesting, right? So what could be the solution to all these things? How would the child find out whether the teacher did all these things? So the little child says that he would follow his teacher one day home and would know what she does about all these things. Whether she really wears pajamas, whether she watches TV, whether she leaves her greens aside, or whether she picks her nose, or whatever she does. All the questions the child wants to be answered. And so for that, he wants to follow the teacher home. After which he says he would write all this down in a poem that the teacher would be able to read back to her students. So what does this poem tell us, children? This poem surely shows us the cuteness, curiosity, and dilemma a very young child has for his or her teacher. It also shows us a child's expectations from the teacher, whether the teacher is just what the child has thought of to be. Most of us will relate to this poem because many of us will have our favorite teachers who we want to know more about. I hope, students, you might have enjoyed this poem today. Thank you, dear students, and have a wonderful day ahead.